What makes a monster? Not the grotesque creatures that lurk in shadows or the demons that haunt our nightmares, but the monsters who walk among us wearing gentle smiles and speaking sweet words. The ones who hold our hands while secretly plotting our destruction. The ones who watch us wither away and say nothing. In the bustling corridors of a Houston hospital, a predator moves silently through the halls, his weapon not a knife or gun, but something far more insidious: trust. For over a decade, he wielded this weapon with surgical precision, leaving behind a trail of shattered lives and broken futures. His name was Kareem Zakikani, and his story serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers come wrapped in the guise of love. This isn't a tale of passion gone wrong or love turned sour. This is the story of calculated destruction, of a man who knowingly infected multiple women with HIV, watching them deteriorate while maintaining his facade of devotion. It's a narrative that forces us to question the very foundations of trust and intimacy, asking us to consider, how well do we really know those we let into our hearts? Welcome to True Crime Stories Archive, your gateway into the darkest corners of human nature. Here, we uncover the haunting realities that lurk beneath seemingly ordinary lives. If you appreciate these deep dives into true crime, please consider subscribing to join our growing community of truth seekers. The year was 2013, and Sarita Anderson had carved out a life of quiet dignity for herself. As a security officer at a Houston hospital, she took pride in her independence, her ability to stand on her own 2 feet. She wasn't actively searching for love, her focus was on building a stable future, one careful step at a time. But fate, with its cruel sense of irony, had other plans. Enter the enigmatic figure of Kareem Zakikani, whose presence in the hospital corridors seemed to command attention without effort. There was something magnetic about him, an intangible quality that drew people into his orbit. His voice carried a peculiar blend of authority and warmth, while his laughter seemed to possess the remarkable ability to transform the sterile hospital environment into something more intimate, more human. For Sarita, their initial encounters were nothing more than brief exchanges, fragments of conversation stolen between their demanding shifts. But there was something different about the way Kareem listened, something that set him apart from the casual workplace interactions she was accustomed to. When she spoke, his attention felt absolute, as if her words were precious gems he was carefully collecting and storing away. Yet beneath this carefully constructed facade of attentiveness lay a master manipulator. Kareem had perfected the art of drawing people out while revealing virtually nothing about himself. Each question he asked was carefully calibrated, designed to create an illusion of intimacy while maintaining his walls of secrecy. His charm wasn't just a natural trait, it was a finely honed weapon. What Sarita couldn't have known, what none of his victims could have known, was that Kareem's life was built on a foundation of devastating secrets. Behind the engaging smile and thoughtful demeanor was a married man. His wife, Jennifer, had already fallen victim to his deadly deception, though her story wouldn't emerge until much later. As the weeks unfolded, Sarita found herself drawn deeper into Kareem's carefully crafted web. Their conversations evolved from quick exchanges about workplace frustrations to deeper discussions about hopes, dreams, and the future. He had a way of making each interaction feel significant, as if their connection was something rare and precious. For Sarita, who had spent years focusing on her career and independence, this gradual emotional intimacy felt like a reward for her patience. Here was someone who seemed to understand her, who appeared to value not just her presence but her essence. The warmth of his attention was like stepping into sunlight after a long winter welcome, natural, and seemingly without threat. But while Sarita was beginning to imagine a future brightened by possibility, Kareem was orchestrating a tragedy. His attention wasn't a gift, it was a carefully laid trap. Every shared laugh, every moment of apparent vulnerability, every promise of a deeper connection was tainted by a truth he deliberately concealed. The truth that Kareem concealed stretched back to 2008, when he had received news that should have marked a turning point in his life. In a sterile doctor's office, surrounded by the antiseptic smell of medical facilities, he learned he was HIV positive. This moment should have been a catalyst for change, an opportunity to face reality and protect those who trusted him. Instead, it became the beginning of a devastating campaign of silence. His wife Jennifer was the first to experience the horrific consequences of his deception. By 2009, she began noticing changes in her health that defied explanation. What started as persistent fatigue evolved into a constellation of mysterious symptoms that left medical professionals puzzled. The devastating revelation of her HIV-positive status should have prompted Kareem to acknowledge his role, to finally break his silence. Yet he remained mute, watching as his wife grappled with the diagnosis that he had knowingly given her. The period between 2008 and 2013 became a dark chapter in Kareem's history of deception. He moved through life with an almost supernatural ability to compartmentalize, maintaining his marriage while pursuing relationships with other women. His method was consistent. He would enter their lives as a source of comfort, a beacon of stability, only to vanish when questions began to surface or suspicions arose. When Sarita entered his life, Kareem had already perfected his pattern of deception. Their relationship deepened with the steady rhythm of falling leaves, natural, inevitable, and seemingly harmless. Every shared moment was carefully choreographed by Kareem, each gesture of affection calculated to strengthen the bonds of trust he would ultimately betray. As their connection grew stronger, Sarita did what any responsible adult would do. In a conversation that seemed to exemplify their mature approach to relationship building, she suggested they both get tested for sexually transmitted diseases. It was a moment of profound irony. Her attempt at protecting their future became another opportunity for Kareem to deepen his deception. His response was delivered with practiced ease, a smile accompanying the words that would later haunt Sarita. "I'm clean." 2 words, spoken with such conviction that they erased any shadow of doubt from Sarita's mind. In that moment, her heart swelled with admiration for what she perceived as his openness and responsibility. She couldn't have known that she was listening to a lie that would alter the course of her life forever. The year 2014 marked the beginning of Sarita's descent into a nightmare she couldn't yet comprehend. The changes in her body began subtly, like whispers that gradually grew into screams she couldn't ignore. What started as routine fatigue after her shifts transformed into an overwhelming exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure. Her once healthy appetite began to wane, turning meals from enjoyment into obligation. The mirror became an enemy, reflecting back a story of deterioration she struggled to understand. Her clothes, once perfectly fitted, now hung loose on her frame, marking the steady progression of unexplained weight loss. Even the simple act of climbing a flight of stairs became an ordeal, leaving her breathless and dizzy, her body betraying her in ways she couldn't explain. The medical odyssey that followed was a maze of dead ends and mounting frustration. Doctor after doctor examined her, ordered tests, offered theories that led nowhere. Blood work came back inconclusive. Scans revealed nothing definitive. Each appointment ended the same way, with medical professionals wearing puzzled expressions and offering hollow reassurances that everything appeared normal. "Maybe it's stress," they would say, or, "Perhaps you're working too hard." But Sarita knew her body, knew the difference between ordinary fatigue and the bone-deep exhaustion that had become her constant companion. Something was fundamentally wrong, and no amount of rest or lifestyle changes seemed to make a difference. Throughout this progression of mysterious symptoms, Kareem remained a constant presence, but his role was far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. He watched her deterioration with the detached interest of someone observing an experiment they had set in motion. Each day, he witnessed her struggle to maintain her normal routine. He saw the way she pushed through exhaustion to complete her shifts. He noticed how her uniform became increasingly loose, how her once vibrant energy dimmed to a shadow of its former self. And still, he said nothing. The man who had promised her love and safety, who had looked into her eyes and sworn his honesty, maintained his silence while watching her health crumble piece by piece. Each day presented him with countless opportunities to speak the truth, to give her the information she desperately needed to understand what was happening to her body. Each day, he chose silence. It was during yet another frustrating medical appointment that fate finally intervened. After exhausting virtually every other possibility, a doctor paused thoughtfully before suggesting something that hadn't crossed Sarita's mind. The recommendation for an HIV test hung in the air like a suspended moment in time, seeming almost absurd given her careful approach to relationships and trust in Kareem's assurances. The suggestion struck Sarita like a bolt from the blue. HIV? The very idea seemed impossible. She had been cautious, responsible, had trusted someone who had looked her in the eyes and promised his honesty. But desperation for answers outweighed her disbelief, and she agreed to the test, even as her mind rejected the possibility. The days waiting for results stretched like years, each hour weighted with anxiety and uncertainty. When she finally sat across from her doctor again, the gravity in his eyes told her everything before he could speak the words that would shatter her world. "Sarita, I'm sorry, but your test came back positive. You have HIV." The diagnosis hit her with the force of a physical blow. The room seemed to spin, the walls closing in as her mind struggled to process this impossible reality. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, drowning out the doctor's continued explanation. Through the fog of shock, one thought crystallized with terrible clarity: Kareem. With trembling hands and a voice she barely recognized as her own, Sarita made the call that would confirm her worst fears. The conversation that followed was brief but devastating. When confronted, Kareem's admission was chilling not in its delivery but in its casual acceptance. "Yes," he said, acknowledging his knowledge of his HIV status. When pressed about how long he had known, his response, "Since 2008," felt like a second diagnosis, a confirmation that their entire relationship had been built on a foundation of lethal deception. 6 years? He had known for 6 years and had chosen every day to maintain his silence. Every kiss, every intimate moment, every promise of a future together had been tainted by this knowledge. The magnitude of this betrayal was almost impossible to comprehend. Kareem hadn't just betrayed her trust, he had weaponized it, using her faith in him as a tool for destruction. But as Sarita grappled with this devastating revelation, another horrifying realization began to take shape. If Kareem had maintained this deception for 6 years, how many other lives had he damaged? How many other women had trusted him, only to have that trust turned into a weapon against them? This betrayal sparked a determination in Sarita that would eventually lead to justice. With a courage born of anger and a desire to prevent others from suffering the same fate, she contacted law enforcement. Her voice, though shaking with emotion, remained steady as she detailed her story to investigators who quickly recognized the gravity of the situation. As detectives began unraveling the tangled web of Kareem's deceptions, a pattern of calculated destruction emerged. Their investigation revealed that Sarita's story, as devastating as it was, represented just one thread in a tapestry of betrayal that stretched back over a decade. The revelations that followed painted a picture more horrifying than anyone could have anticipated. Jennifer's story emerged as a crucial piece of the puzzle. She wasn't just another victim, she was Kareem's wife, a detail that added another layer of cruelty to his deceptions. The investigators discovered that Jennifer had tested positive for HIV years before Sarita entered the picture, marking the beginning of Kareem's pattern of deliberate infection. As the investigation deepened, more women came forward, each with their own heartbreaking account. Some had met Kareem during vulnerable periods in their lives, during career transitions, after difficult breakups, or while navigating personal challenges. He had a particular talent for identifying vulnerability and exploiting it under the guise of support and understanding. The stories shared common threads: his initial charm, the gradual building of trust, the careful manipulation, and ultimately, the devastating health consequences. One victim described losing her career as a flight attendant, her dreams of travel and adventure grounded by the illness he had knowingly given her. Another spoke of losing her fiancé when her diagnosis came to light, the future she had planned crumbling beneath the weight of Kareem's deception. The emotional toll on these women extended far beyond their physical health. Many spoke of struggling with depression, anxiety, and a profound loss of trust in relationships. Some had isolated themselves from family and friends, bearing their diagnosis in silence out of shame and fear of judgment. The courtroom proceedings brought all these threads of destruction together in a tapestry of justice. The room was filled to capacity, each seat occupied by someone whose life had been irrevocably changed by Kareem's actions. The air was heavy with unspoken pain and the collective weight of shattered dreams. Kareem Zakikani sat at the defendant's table, his face a mask of indifference that chilled observers. The same charm that had once drawn victims to him was notably absent, replaced by an emotionless demeanor that spoke volumes about his true nature. His calm in the face of such serious charges disturbed even seasoned court personnel. The prosecution's opening statement cut through the tension like a blade. They methodically laid out the timeline of Kareem's deceptions, starting with his 2008 diagnosis and continuing through years of deliberate infection of multiple partners. The evidence painted a picture not of ignorance or mistake, but of calculated cruelty executed over more than a decade. When Sarita took the stand, the courtroom fell into a profound silence. Her testimony began with the simple things: how they met, the trust he built, the future he promised. But as she described her declining health and the devastating moment of diagnosis, her voice carried the weight of betrayal that resonated with every victim present. The prosecutor guided her through her story, each detail adding to the mounting evidence of Kareem's deliberate deception. She described the phone call where he admitted knowing his status since 2008, her voice steady despite the pain evident in her words. Throughout her testimony, Kareem remained unmoved, his face betraying no emotion, no remorse for the lives he had destroyed. Other victims followed, each adding their own chapter to the story of devastation. Jennifer's testimony about discovering her diagnosis while married to Kareem particularly affected the jury. The pattern became clear: this wasn't a series of accidents or oversights, but a calculated campaign of destruction. The defense offered minimal resistance, faced with overwhelming evidence of their client's deliberate actions. When Kareem finally stood to address the court, his words were as chilling as his silence had been. "I plead guilty," he stated, offering no explanation, no apology, no sign of remorse for the lives he had systematically destroyed. His voice carried the same detached tone he had used when admitting his HIV status to Sarita: clinical, emotionless, devoid of human compassion. The judge's chambers fell silent as she prepared to deliver the sentence. Years of legal experience hadn't prepared her for a case of such calculated cruelty. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of justice finally served. "Kareem Zakikani, you are hereby sentenced to 30 years in prison." The sentence, while significant, sparked mixed reactions among the victims. Some felt relief at seeing their abuser face consequences, while others questioned whether any prison term could truly compensate for the permanent alteration of their lives. Legal experts explained that despite the devastating nature of his actions, the charges were classified as aggravated assault rather than murder, limiting the maximum possible sentence. Today, Kareem Zakikani serves his sentence in the O.B. Ellis Unit, a maximum security prison in Huntsville, Texas. He will be eligible for parole in 2031, a fact that continues to haunt his victims. For them, there is no parole from the life sentence he imposed through his actions. For Sarita Anderson, the aftermath of Kareem's sentencing marked not an ending, but a beginning. She transformed her tragedy into purpose, becoming an advocate for HIV awareness and education. Her story serves as both warning and inspiration, demonstrating how one can rise from devastating betrayal to help others avoid similar fate. The legacy of Kareem's actions extends far beyond the courthouse. His case sparked important conversations about trust, intimacy, and the responsibility we have to protect those who trust us with their hearts and their lives. It serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous predators aren't those who hide in shadows, but those who walk beside us in broad daylight, wearing masks of love and concern. The ripple effects of Kareem's actions continue to impact lives across Houston and beyond. His victims face daily challenges that extend far beyond their physical health. Many struggle with trust issues that affect every new relationship. Some have had to completely rebuild their lives, changing careers and social circles as they adapt to their new reality. The medical community has used this case to highlight the importance of open communication and regular testing in relationships. Healthcare providers now often cite this case when discussing the critical nature of disclosure and the devastating consequences of silence. For many of Kareem's victims, the healing process remains ongoing. Some have found strength in support groups, sharing their stories with others who understand their journey. Others have chosen more private paths to recovery, working with therapists to rebuild their sense of trust and self-worth. Jennifer, Kareem's wife, continues to navigate the complex emotions of being both spouse and victim. Her story particularly resonates with those who have experienced betrayal from those closest to them. The duality of her position being both wife and victim adds another layer to the already complex narrative of trust and betrayal. The 30-year sentence raises important questions about justice in cases involving deliberate HIV transmission. Legal experts continue to debate whether current laws adequately address the severity of such crimes. Can any prison term truly compensate for permanently altering multiple lives? How do we measure justice when the damage is irreversible? Kareem's case has become a reference point in discussions about criminal intent and public health. His methodical approach to deception, maintaining relationships while knowingly exposing partners to HIV, demonstrates a level of calculation that many find particularly disturbing. This story serves as a somber reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that charm can mask malevolence, and that trust, once weaponized, becomes a tool of destruction. It forces us to question not just who we trust, but how we verify that trust. As we conclude this chilling narrative, the question remains, how did someone like Kareem Zakakani maintain his deception for so long? Perhaps the answer lies in our human desire to believe in the good in others, to trust those who show us kindness and understanding. His ability to manipulate this fundamental human trait makes his crimes particularly disturbing. The impact of this case extends beyond the immediate victims. Family members, friends, and colleagues of those affected continue to grapple with their own feelings of helplessness and guilt. Many wonder if they could have noticed signs, if they could have somehow prevented the tragedy that unfolded before them. Sarita's advocacy work has become a beacon of hope in the darkness left by Kareem's actions. She speaks at awareness events, sharing her story not from a place of victimhood, but from a position of empowerment. Her message is clear: trust should be earned, verified, and maintained through honest communication. The healthcare workers who eventually diagnosed these women have also been affected by this case. Many have adjusted their approach to patient care, becoming more attuned to subtle signs that might indicate a deeper problem. The case has become a teaching tool in medical communities, illustrating the importance of comprehensive testing and open dialogue about sexual health. Law enforcement officials who work the case speak of it as one of the most disturbing examples of calculated cruelty they've encountered. The methodical nature of Kareem's deception, his ability to maintain multiple relationships while knowing the harm he was causing, reflects a level of psychological manipulation that continues to disturb even seasoned investigators. For those watching this video, we encourage you to take away more than just the shocking details of this crime. Consider the broader implications about trust, honesty, and the responsibility we have to protect not just ourselves, but others in our intimate relationships. If this story has affected you, please share it with others who might benefit from its lessons. Your subscription and engagement help us continue bringing these important stories to light, ensuring that voices like Sarita's are heard and that crucial conversations about trust and safety continue. Remember, while Kareem Zakakani will eventually complete his prison sentence, the impact of his actions continues to ripple through countless lives. His case stands as a stark reminder that sometimes the most dangerous predators aren't those who hide in shadows, but those who walk beside us in the light, wearing masks of love and compassion. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you think the 30-year sentence adequately addresses the severity of his crimes? Share your perspectives in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to True Crime Stories Archive for more in-depth examinations of cases that challenge our understanding of human nature. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and remember, trust should never be blind, and love should never require silence in the face of harm.